So hi also from my side. I'm Viktoria Pammer-Shindler. I work as an assistant professor at Graz University of Technology in Austria and also as research area manager at the No Center in Graz, which is a center for applied research, which means we do a lot of projects basically together with end users, with industry partners. That part of the No Center about whose work I'm going to talk here is that the No Center aims to revolutionize learning in organizations via innovative technology and using co-design, participatory design methods in order to co-design technology on the one hand, work practice, business processes, and business models on the other hand. The core understanding underlying this being that if technology is disruptive enough, then we cannot simply introduce technology into a workplace and expect things otherwise to go on as before, but that significant changes will also materialize at the level of work practice, business processes, and business models. So at relevant levels of organizational behavior. In this talk, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the challenges we perceive on learning in modern enterprises, focusing on manufacturing industry, so on Industry 4.0, and how we approach solving these challenges using technologies and using our experience. A lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is not only relevant in manufacturing industry context, but is more generally relevant for other industry sectors as well. This is not a scientific talk. Nonetheless, what I'm going to talk about is based on a long institutional experience with innovation projects in learning. So overall, over all domains on knowledge technologies and learning technologies, data analytics, we have carried out over 600 industry collaborations since the No Center started to exist in 2001, together with really many industrial partners. And from a more scientific point of view, we have been working since 2005 in really big European projects on topics of innovation via technologies in terms of learning in organizations. So is learning relevant for organizations today, or why is learning relevant for organizations today? The more dynamic the environment of an organization, it has been said, the more necessary it is for the organization to learn. So in the face of change, wherever that change is coming from, via technological changes in a domain sector, via globalization, other pressures, instead of being petrified and screaming because change is overwhelming, what you want to have is people who are feeling confident that they will be able to deal with change. And learning is the one mechanism, organizational learning in organizations is the one mechanism on how to basically achieve that. In the face of complex and unpredictable changes, learning cannot be designed top-down by learning managers, but learning needs to be a collective effort within the organization. So if the change were of a nature where it would be easy to say, okay, that is what is going to happen, we need to do a few steps in that direction in order to be able to be successful as an organization, then it would be pretty easy to assign one or two persons responsible for learning, for managing the change in an organization and saying, well, now you try to think of how to organize this. However, very often the change is complex and unpredictable, and no one really knows what is going to happen. And I think Industry 4.0 is a really excellent example of that. So manufacturing industry and a lot of society and researchers dealing with that do realize that that change is going on in the manufacturing industry. There has been digitalization, there is automation ongoing, but no one really actually knows how manufacturing industry is going to look like in 10 years. So it's unpredictable and changes are going to be complex. So it really doesn't make sense to assign one person in any organization the job of dealing with the change, but really, ideally, everyone within the organization needs to be on the lookout of what is changing and what changes are necessary in order to react, in order to successfully adapt as an organization to that change. So this means that individuals at all levels need to participate in learning. And learning needs to happen at an individual level, so every single person should, or I think also really has an interest in investing in professional growth in order to stay employable in order to be successful in the job. But learning also has to happen at the team level. What are best practices? How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to organize our work? And at an organizational level, what is going to be our business process? Maybe, depending on the disruption, even what's going to be our business model. How are we going to earn money 10 years from now? This sounds like a lot to do, so this is not easy. This is not easy on the people working, okay? So jobs are challenging, and I personally think that the easy jobs are kind of going with time, right? So there are not going to be so many easy, unchallenging jobs around. If only one person has to deal with change in an organization, that makes it easy for everyone. Everyone can continue working until someone tells me what is it I have to do differently in the future. However, if everyone is involved, so that's very challenging for everyone involved, but it also has the potential to motivate employees, so to take on responsibility, to take on a little bit the self-design of the job, to get the possibility to shape how my own job is going to be. And especially it also unburdens management. Suddenly management is not only responsible for everything, does not need to manage everything, but well, can delegate a little bit the responsibility. So we really did see in some companies we worked with that such a decentralization, giving over responsibility for change, for learning, asking others for input, for ideas on how to deal with change, that this unburdens managers, especially in SMEs, but on the smaller end, because SMEs could also be organizations up to 250 people, which is really very different from organizations with 50 people, which is still a medium-sized enterprise. So especially at the smaller side of SMEs, managers tend to be overburdened or burdened with a lot of responsibility on all edges and ends, because there is simply not that level of specialization that you find in large organizations. And here especially it can really be a relief for management to be more inclusive and share the responsibility over more shoulders. And it can motivate employees to have higher stakes, to participate more in the success of the organization. We have been conducting an interview study in the last year and this year with very large manufacturing companies, with the very large ones because we expected those to have the most resources to explicitly address or think of the ongoing changes. And we were basically asking, now under this umbrella term Industry 4.0, there's talk of this change. What of the changes are you actually seeing? How do you think the work is changing, and what is the relevance of learning? And how do you think you will need to deal with these issues? Most people agreed that a lot of the job designs, a lot of the jobs are going to become knowledge work or have already become knowledge work. So knowledge work is increasing. Tasks are getting more complex and jobs are increasingly designed as knowledge work, also in manufacturing settings. So you have on the one hand a lot of automation, but then who maintains the robots? Who deals with the large factory floors with thousands of machines? Okay, you don't have the one operator responsible only for one machine, but you have the one operator responsible for thousands of machines. This means the task is not getting easier, because now it's not sufficient to work for 20 years with one machine and then knowing the ins and outs of this machine, but you need to be able to deal with a lot of different machines, and every machine is a little bit differently, and every year technological progress means that the company buys new machines, so you need to be able to deal with that. And then, so remember we're talking to large companies. Large companies have said, so for the last decades, the efforts in all globally active organizations has been to centralize. The top-level management, the headquarters, wanted to homogenize as much as possible across different locations, different sites of an organization, and we wanted to homogenize processes. We put SAP to everything. We wanted to model the processes exactly the same way everywhere. Now we are realizing, okay, it has its merits to centralize, but now we need to decentralize again. We need to give decision-making power and responsibility to local sites in order to be more flexible, in order to react more flexibly to local changes, to market demands, to whatever. Decentralization again means that more responsibility is moving towards the individual person, towards middle management, and even towards well, factory plant managers and so on. Now, what are challenges for learning? So you could say, okay, this is all fine, so now we just set up a training program. We need to increase maybe a little bit our budget for 2 years. We set up a training program, everyone gets trained, and that's fine. But traditional education, and that was also clearly seen by all our interview partners, traditional education comes to its limit. Employees are used from the private spheres of life to the internet to very engaging apps. So this means, on the one hand, they're used to immediate access to information. So this means there is increasingly a very low tolerance for not finding relevant information in-house. Employees, if they don't find what they're looking for, they tend to look to other information sources. That is fine, on the one hand, okay? You could say, as an organization, we don't need to provide all information. And that's true to a certain extent. However, there are still areas where organizations want to make sure that organizations find the in-house information, find the rules, norms, and legislations according to which an organization has to work, finds also the procedures, the ways the organization wants its employees to do the work, so it needs to provide certain information in-house. Organizations have a legitimate interest in quality checking material. Okay, so I think in the learning community and also in the CSCW community, as a research community, we tend to have a very open approach. So we say open information is great, everyone can contribute, and you know, it's an open discussion amongst equals. But still within organizations, the more you go into the core areas of operation, the more you realize that it's in the core interest of an organization to do some quality checking. Not every information is equally right or equally applicable within the context that an organization operates in. On the other hand, of course, organizations might systematically attach to new open knowledge sources and networks. So if an organization realizes that their employees are finding relevant, useful, and adequately correct or applicable knowledge outside, then as an organization there's a legitimate interest to systematically attach to these sources of knowledge and not leave it up to the single employee where this one was maybe better at finding relevant information than another one. And then, of course, organizations need to offer engaging and modern in-house training. This also means specifically in terms of technology. From private life, people are used to engaging and fun apps that simply work. They are easy to understand, aesthetically pleasing, addictive via social software features. So maybe designed either by accident or by design with persuasive technology principles as background. Let's put it like that. A lot of learning management systems or training structures in large organizations are not exactly designed like that. And as people are used to very high standards in usability, in engagement, in enjoyment, in interaction from private areas of life, they come to expect that also within an organizational context. And this is a challenge. The people we were talking with, they were decision makers, people responsible for change, for learning, for production. They are aware of that, but of course it's not an easy challenge. So no one expects large organizations to have addressed this by tomorrow. Moving on to what we as Know Center take away from the study for ourselves and moving away to the solutions and solution approaches we offer our industry research partners we are working with, is that on the one hand, technology, information technologies are key drivers for change. Specifically in manufacturing industry, it is digitalization and automation that is driving the change. But on the other hand, information technologies can also empower and engage individuals, teams, and organizations to adapt to that change, to learn. One part of our solution approach is that learning in multiple roles is a relevant and omnipresent meta-activity at different places in an organization. It's relevant directly within the operative work. It's relevant in all knowledge creation and innovation processes happening in organizations. And learning is relevant in inter-organizational collaboration, for instance, along supply chains. So this is also a recurring theme relevant for organizations that networking, learning in networks is relevant, there's a potential to learn along the supply chain. Individuals, actors on behalf of their organizations, they need to learn in trainings, from and through experience, from and through colleagues in communities of practice and learning, and they need to access relevant knowledge in the work process, and by that gradually, unconsciously, over time, learn and integrate new knowledge into their work practice. Okay, so we know what has to be done. What can technology do to help people learn in an engaging manner, learn at all these levels? What is the role of technology? So technology can help by providing and structuring content. Questions in design, questions and challenges in design are around the questions of who structures content, who provides the content. So where is the relevant content? Do we have enough relevant content for learning in-house? Do we need to get the content from somewhere else? Okay. We have been talking a lot about design trade-offs. Yesterday in the workshop I was in, Gerhard Fischer was now talking about design trade-offs. So these are questions that one cannot answer once and for all situations, for all organizations. In every specific instance, one needs to ask oneself, so technology could provide content in an engaging manner, integrated into the work process, but where do we get the content from? Where do we get the metadata from that we assign the content so that it can be retrieved and represented in the right place at the right time? Technology can also help by providing space for discussion and reflection. So we have been talking a lot about learning by reflection, learning with and from colleagues, so social learning, learning by observation, peer-to-peer learning. So one role of technology is simply to provide the space for such social learning. In global organizations, one of the recurring challenges is that you have teams in remote sites, in different sites, that are nonetheless expected to basically provide the same service, basically do the same stuff. And never are two teams performing in exactly the same manner. What you want to have is some way of transferring knowledge, some way of sharing experiences across the sites. Naturally, technology can help. You can, of course, also have people travel to and from. But depending, on how far the teams are from each other and how often you want this exchange to happen, well, technology is simply an enabler of communication. Technology can also help by, and the design challenge that I wanted to say, the design challenge associated with that is on the one hand, of course, with whom do people need to talk, and whether and how it is possible to make persistent the result of this communication, okay? So if I take the telephone, it is not very obvious if two people are discussing a problem via telephone, how to make the resulting insights persistent and explicitly available to the rest of the organization. It is, of course, easier with digital technologies, but still not a very trivial problem, okay? So this is something to consider in design. Thirdly, technology can help by creating awareness for relevant action and information. It can send you prompts. Technology can become proactive by doing data analysis, saying, okay, here there's something happening, someone should look at that, think whether that's what action should be taken. Technology can also highlight new information that might be needed to be appropriated into the work process. I think as computer science researchers, we tend to like or find it fun to investigate proactive technology, and it's very interesting. I know that on the one hand, it's very hard to design adaptive and proactive technology that is intelligent enough in practice, okay? Because in practice, everything is always different, and it's very hard to come up with a model of adaptivity that is robust enough in order not to annoy users. And the second point with proactive technology is, which relates to the first, that it's very difficult. If you have a proactive piece of technology, its point is drawing the user's attention to something. That's fine. But mostly when you draw the user's attention to something, you also draw the user's attention away from something. And it's really very, very, very hard to make this proactiveness in a way that you don't draw the user's attention away from something while this person is just doing something else that is of relevance, and to not interrupt the user, in short. Okay, this is really incredibly hard, and I've done again and again research and projects and trials on that, and I would not say that we have been overly successful with that. Okay, so, and it's also not because we are stupid. It's just because it's really, really, really difficult. And finally, technology can help by planning and guiding and structuring learning. So technology can really scaffold learning and give really support on how to learn. And here, one of the challenges is how much of such guidance is appreciated by users. So users should not feel belittled by technological guidance. They need to accept that. And the second challenge is that of fade out. So again, actually in both workshops that I've been participating in the last 2 days, this was a topic. So if you scaffold, if you structure and aid the learning process itself, at one point you basically would like, from a pedagogical point of view, to pull away the crutches, and you would like to have people who are self-directed learners who don't need that much aid in learning and structuring learning. Okay, so if that sounds good, if that sounds interesting to you, what you are doing, and if you are not already in somehow collaborating with us, discussing with us, so I'm really keen to engage with others, with companies, research organizations to discuss on what could be the role of technologies, what is really the edge of technologies, how can they support learning in organizations. And one promotion, the Know Center is organizing annually the I-Know conference on the data-driven futures, and maybe particularly relevant to what we are discussing here, we are holding this year a workshop on technologies, algorithms, and humans in Industry 4.0, where we are trying to address this whole complex issue of what are going to be relevant technologies and algorithms in industry, how is that going to change work process, and what will be the role of humans in that. It would be great to meet you there, and for now I say thank you.
Thank you. Every time I have to tap it. I didn't get any questions in the system, but I have a question of my own. Is there a possibility, and if there is, what happens when employees get over-dependent on those assisting systems?
It's a really good question. You mean on the learning assistants? So I don't have a good answer for the learning assistants, but I have one answer that may be of relevance in terms of gamification. So gamification is one approach that a lot of hope has been set on, because at once learning and whatever people are doing, so engaging with a knowledge-based system, maintaining the knowledge-based, so activities that were supposed to be boring, now by gamification concepts you can make engaging again. So that is the great hope. So you give people badges, you embed stuff into small plays, into games, and then people have fun in doing basically boring stuff. That's really cool. However, it is known that what gamification does, it makes people reliant on this external stimulus. So what would actually be the really gold standard, the really high ideal that you want to have, is that the activities are fun. That learning, acquiring new knowledge, changing behavior, trying to think of new ways of how to address this problem, this is fun. It should not be the motivator that I get a badge or some recognition by someone else. It should be intrinsically motivating to learn something. And so with gamification or with too much gamification in learning support systems, there is a risk that you make people dependent on these external motivating factors. And I think it will, so I know of no literature that answers your question in terms of learning assistance or learning guidance. But I would expect exactly the same. So if people expect to be guided, then there may be a real risk that they're not learning to become self-directed learners, that they're not actually developing this intrinsic motivation to look for solutions to problems, to try to see different angles to problems, but that they're relying on simply following what the learning, reflection, guidance, whatever is telling people to do. And that is exactly not what we would want people to learn.
Well, but we also have this problem at schools anyway. Just studying for it. Ah, yes.
About the adaptation, I found that quite good that he said it's incredibly difficult to get adaptation right, and we also have failed quite a lot of times to get even somewhere close to getting it right. So I was wondering, what is the core of that problem? Is it that we do not sufficiently understand error? And if you look at language learning, for example, adaptation works really good. Figuring out that somebody doesn't know something because they did some multiple choice exercise that said the translation of this word is wrong, and then fine-tuning the number of times you will see it again, that works really well. But in other areas of more complex learning, is it maybe that we don't understand error?
My interpretation was that reality is simply very, very complex, and it's not, it's simply by the nature of reality, it's not easy to model reality as a whole. Okay, so physicists have been working for thousands of years on trying to understand kind of how physically the world works, and they still have not a unified vision of that. So computer science has been around for a very much shorter time. We have been working on kind of context-aware systems for a very much shorter time, and it's very natural that we are struggling to represent that. And I'm also unsure of how and with what formalisms a complex reality could be captured sufficiently in a very general sense. So to some extent, I think it's this generality that is the issue, because in specific situations, the more we know at design time about what are the relevant features, the more we can predict how the system is going to be used, the better we are with adaptivity. One problem, for instance, that I was also now specifically thinking of when talking, is that of interruptibility. So when is a person not focusing, when can I draw the user's attention away from something, because the user is anyway maybe in a mode of working in a distracted manner. And to some extent, the gold standard would be how easy it is for other humans to understand whether or not to distract you. And even that is sometimes simply very, very difficult to understand whether I can ask you something or not, so whether I'm now disrupting you. And we know, for instance, one of the problems with talking on the telephone while driving is that the other person on the other end does not see the same context and does not know when maybe to shortly stop talking, whereas if you're sitting beside the person who is driving, you see the same context, you understand it, and quite naturally you stop talking when there's something critical happening and resume talking to the driver when that is out. But here, as a co-driver, you get the full context, okay? You get everything. Sounds, vision, no filtering. And that is simply very hard to do in context-aware systems, to get the complete context and then draw out the relevant notion. And then simply, again, there are humans who are very bad at identifying that.
Thank you. If you still haven't decided about the INO conference, I recommend you go and check out their website, because there are many very interesting topics there.
Thanks.